Now, the question is, should pay be tied to performance? The answer to this is maybe. We need to diagnose the specific situation. And there are situations where pay for performance is going to be harder to execute. When we have jobs that involve a lot of multitasking, when there are real high level quality issues, or when there's real necessary component of teamwork, then pay for performance may be more limited in its effectiveness. That's not to say it can't be effective, but it may be more difficult to manage in those circumstances. And so we have to question whether we are really up to that challenge and whether we're asking the right questions. We have to consider what employees think. There's evidence in the research literature that, on average, workers and management like pay for performance. We need to ask that question locally and not just depend on some research that we've read somewhere in a textbook or a journal. The performance that we see can be from individual performers within the organization, but it could also be on who we're attracting and who we're retaining. And that sorting effect and the incentive effect can both be elements of what explains why we see success in performance-based pay systems. And when we look at that in terms of a cost accounting perspective, we see that for every dollar spent on performance-based pay, the organization can yield more than double in organizational earnings. But we have to go into these plans with eyes wide open and understand that these plans can and do fail. And so we have to diagnose the situation carefully to see if it's appropriate for the organization, and then be very careful that we are executing with discipline and due diligence to the best practices. We need to consider again strategy. Is the plan supporting our strategic goals and creating that link between human resources and the strategic goals? We have to also consider the structure of the plan and whether it has necessary flexibility for the organization we're working within. And we have to look at those processes and make sure that they're being executed at high standards and make sure that we are measuring performance well and that we're funding the pay for performance in a way that we're keeping our promises. Pay for performance can be a controversial type of system depending on an organization. While employees like it, they often scrutinize it and look at it, especially in terms of its fairness. They look at things like distributive justice, as how fairly are the rewards being distributed across the organization? Are all the high dollar amounts going to the highest powered people, and are the rewards very small for most other employees? That's a question of distributive justice. There's also questions of procedural justice. Examining the process is determining what individuals and groups are receiving in terms of performance-based pay, and whether those processes have elements that make them accurate and fair. For all of these elements of fairness, communication is a very critical consideration because we can head off a lot of problems by being appropriately transparent and giving employees accurate knowledge instead of leaving them in the dark and letting them fill in the blanks with inaccurate gossip. Of course, we always have to consider legal considerations and ensure that there isn't adverse impact against groups that in ways that is unrelated to performance.